Welcome to Seed Friday, everyone. So, let me tell y'all what happened to me today. Actually, it was yesterday. But I had to go to the store and I had to take some things back to the store, right? To return some items. While I was in the store, I picked up some other items, right? Because I said, let me see if I see something else in the store. So I went to the register to return my stuff. The young lady asked me for my receipt. I gave it to her. She began to ring the stuff up, and she was ringing up. She asked me what did I want to ring up to replace the credit, right? I asked her, I said, well, how much credit do I have? And she told me the amount. And I said, that doesn't add up. That's not right. And she said, well, I didn't do anything. I just rang your stuff back up. And I said, and my husband was with me. And so he was like, well, babe, well, maybe the stuff went on sale. And I was like, it doesn't matter if the stuff went on sale. So I immediately start asking the young lady, well, tell me if the items that I just gave you, that you just took out the bag, if they match with what I paid. And she stated yes. I said, so it doesn't matter if the stuff went on sale. I want what I paid for it, right? And so the young lady had a bit of an attitude, but it wasn't a nasty attitude, if y'all know what I mean. So I immediately told her, I said, ma'am, and I've never said this to anybody before, right? And if my kids are watching, don't laugh at me. But I said, ma'am, the math is not mathing. And she says, well, the machine added it up. I said, ma'am, it's not mathing. And so my husband was like, well, babe, I get what you're saying. Yes, what you're saying is making sense, but that's what the credit is, right? And I said, well, I'm not agreeing with that. And so to make a long story short, the manager walks over and the manager tells her to take the stuff back off and, do it over. And so the young lady realized that the person that was in front of me that didn't pay for their stuff, it was still rang up. And so it was a little over $20, right? And so she didn't apologize or anything. She just said, oh, I forgot to take the gentleman's stuff off. And so I told her again. So she rang the stuff up and I still told her, I said, ma'am, it's still not right. And so I said, you're still like $20 off. You owe me an extra $20. And so she took it off, everything off again, did it again, and it was right. So needless to say, my husband taps me on the shoulder and says, babe, I apologize. I was wrong. You was right. I said, yeah, that's not the principle. The principle is I'm just not going to agree when I know for a fact what's what, right? I said all that to say, this is what I thought about, y'all. We have to stay rooted and grounded in God's word. We have to stick to what we know is true, which is God's word. So have you ever been somewhere or a part of a conversation, you heard someone say something, you're like, that's not what that means, or that's not right. We have to stick to what the word says and what we know the word is. And God also gives us discernment. So I hope that's a lesson to someone. It's not all about math. It's about, if it doesn't add up, go back to your word. Read your word for yourself. Study your word for yourself to show yourself approved. We have to stay in God's word. We have to keep his word hidden in our heart. So when we're in trouble, and not just in trouble, when we're needing that word for whatever moment or situation that we're faced with, we can go back and remember and recall what we read. We can go back and remember. May not necessarily remember what book it's in, but you know it's in God's word, and you know that that word is true. And then you stand on that word, that solid foundation. So yeah, stick to what you know. And if it's not adding up, go back to the word, look it up, and rest assured and make sure that that's what that word says. And you know what that word says. And don't let nobody else tell you that's not what that word says. Don't let nobody else tell you that, no, that's not what that means. That's not what God says, or that's not what God, or maybe, if God showed you something, or God told you something, or revealed something to you, and now it's been so many years and someone says, well, maybe that wasn't for you, or maybe that's not what God was saying, or maybe, no, stand on God's word. You know what God told you. Stand on his word. Trust him at it. Rely on it. Rely on his word totally, because his word, it can't fail. His word, it won't fail. So yeah, when it's not adding up, always stick to God's word. Stick to what you know is true, which is his word. So yeah, I hope that encouraged someone. I hope that helped someone today. I love y'all. Don't forget to like, share, follow, and subscribe to Voices of Substance on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. And y'all have an amazing Friday.